G'day, welcome to iCULTIVATE. My name's Steve. Kokedamas have been becoming increasingly popular in recent years, and you are able to get them really quite easily in local nurseries these days, but they are really expensive. So what we're going to look at today is how do you make a Kokedama? So come with me and we'll have a look at how you do this. Kokedamas originate in Japan and are becoming more and more popular within Japanese gardens. And the word Kokedama itself loosely translates into moss ball. And you can see with each of these, really what we have is a loose ball of soil with an outer covering of moss. Now this particular one has an outer covering of sphagnum moss. An alternative to that is where we have the outer covering being green sheet moss, the sort of moss that you see laying across a moist area of ground, a moist shady area of ground. What we're going to look at today is how do we make a Kokedama using outer sphagnum moss. Now the materials that you're going to need in order to make your Kokedama include some peat moss, some bonsai potting mixture. Make sure it's the bonsai mixture, not just normal mixture. Some sphagnum moss, some charcoal, and I'll talk about the purpose of these as we go. Some slow release fertilizer and some jute string. Now we're using jute string, but you could use some aluminium wire. Please, if you choose to use wire, don't use steel wire because that will rust, and the rusting of that wire will have an impact on the way in which your Kokedama looks. But we're going to use jute string. Of course, the last thing that you need is the actual plant itself. Now, the plant that you need to choose is the type of plant that would survive and be very happy living in low sunlight or at least part shade, because ultimately the Kokedama is going to exist within a part shade to low sunlight area. So to get started with this, we have to create our Kokedama mixture that we're going to create the ball with. To do that, we need 2 parts of our peat mixture. So there's 1, 2, a little bit more to make up the 2, and 1 part of bonsai mixture. Just add a tiny little bit more. There we go. Into that now we will also add some charcoal. Now the purpose of the charcoal is to help eliminate or at least reduce any odours that come from this plant, because remember it's an indoor plant, and with a bit of water in indoor plants sometimes we can end up with some odours. So I'm just going to add a few teaspoons of the charcoal, maybe 1 more, and then we finish that up with a small amount of slow release fertiliser. Not too much. That's plenty. Once we've got these, we now mix them all in and making sure that they're mixed in thoroughly. Now I like to just use my hands. You might like to wear gloves, up to you, but make sure that we mix it in thoroughly. With our soil mixture complete, what we now need to do is to add some water. Now the idea here is to add enough water so that our mixture is actually able to bind together. So we get our hands in here, get them a bit dirty, mix it all up. And I probably got that pretty close first go, that's just luck. So make sure you start by adding just a small amount because you can't take it back out. You can always add a bit more, but you can't take it out. And so if we get the right amount of moisture in there so that it binds together like that, that's when we know that we've got it right. So with our soil prepared, now what I'm going to do is to prepare the plant. I'm going to first of all remove it from the pot. Now we can loosen the bottom bits of soil, and ultimately what we're going to be doing is creating that ball. Now what we need to do is to compact around this, that soil mixture that we created a moment ago. So one but really important piece of advice that I'd really recommend is that you have a bowl of water handy, because you need to wash your hands periodically, otherwise you'll end up with the soil being on the sphagnum moss, and that will impact on the way in which your final Kokedama product will look. So make sure you have handy and ready to go your string, some water, the soil mixture and your sphagnum moss. We're going to start firstly by taking some of this soil mixture and putting it on the outside like this and pressing it down reasonably firmly. Then wash your hands, get some sphagnum moss and layer this over the outside. Take some string and then you can start your first layer by winding that around the outside. And that will hold that initial layer of moss in place. Hold the string, add some more soil. Wash your hands. Cover that new soil with sphagnum moss. And then continue the layering of the string around the outside. Now the string will have to become, as we progress through this, more firm. But for the moment, it's okay to be loose. Now I've turned it over the other way. I'm going to add some more soil. You'll notice that it is quite messy. Wash your hands. More sphagnum moss. And wrap the string further in order to bind that sphagnum moss in place. Rotate further. Add the soil. Wash your hands and add the sphagnum moss. Bind it on with the string. Now at the moment, the string is reasonably loose, but I will start firming that up very soon. Now I'm going to come to the very last part, the bottom area. Add this last little bit of soil that I have here onto the bottom and cover with sphagnum moss. Now there will be a couple of small areas that we'll need to cover as we go a bit further. Okay, and I can see a couple of little areas that need to be addressed. So now that I've got a layer of sphagnum moss over the outside, covering every little patch of dirt that is visible, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mould this with my hand, squeezing, not too much, but just enough to, you can see a bit of the water squeezing out, and I'm really starting to try and mould it into that spherical shape. There we go. You can see the importance of why it was really important to keep our hands clean, otherwise this sphagnum moss would be getting very dirty now. Now that I've got that nice circular shape, what I'm going to really start doing is binding the string on quite firmly. And be mindful of getting it around the top as well. So now I'm binding it on very firmly. And this will hold the sphagnum moss in place really well. How much string you put on is really not all that critical. What matters is that there is enough to hold it in shape and to also hold the sphagnum moss in place. However, I would recommend not putting on more than you need, because I think the best look of our Kokedama is for the sphagnum moss to be visible. Now you'll notice just how firmly I'm starting to really wind this on now. So once you've got enough string on here to hold the sphagnum moss in place and for the Kokedama to have the nice spherical shape, well then just cut the string and tie it off. Now I would just tie it off by folding it underneath. Rub that through a few times. What I don't want, or what I really don't like in Kokedamas, is when the string is loose. So make sure you get it nice and firm. And with it tied off, you can then cut off the excess. And so there is our Kokedama completed. Now let's talk about the care of our Kokedamas. Remember, these are indoor plants. They don't like full sun. They like to be in part shade or even full shade. So therefore, they have particular needs. Like most indoor plants, they don't like to be overwatered, but given the fact that not contained within a pot, you do need to ensure that they are watered regularly. One way to test whether or not they do need a water is if you feel them. If they feel light, it's probably because they need to get some moisture into them. Now, how do you water them? Well, I would recommend that every day you give them a bit of a mist spray. So spray the leaves with a water mist. And then once a week, depending upon the type, but typically once a week, you can then actually take the Kokedama and submerge it into a pot of some description. Don't submerge the leaves, obviously, just the base, the spherical base. Now, don't leave it submerged in the water for more than a few minutes, because just like all plants, they don't want to be drowning in water. They just need to have moist soil. So leave it in there for a couple of minutes and then take it out, and that should be right for the next week or so. With regards to fertilising, keep in mind that the bonsai mix that you used in this will have some inbuilt fertiliser already in it. But in addition to that, we have already added some slow release fertilisers. So this should be fine for a good 6 months. You may find a little bit later that you might want to add a little bit more fertiliser. Now, I'd recommend getting a soluble fertiliser and just adding a small amount of that into the water that we submerge it. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and you can see that making a Kokedama is a wonderful indoor activity, a wonderful indoor gardening activity that we can do inside and perhaps even with kids. Can I ask you to please go down to the thumbs up and give us a thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, and go to our website, iCULTIVATE.net, and become a member of the community. Thanks for watching.